The execution broadcast. The Exilarian Grand Auditorium gleamed with cold precision. Crystal spires caught the light of 3 artificial suns, casting mathematically perfect patterns across the assembled dignitaries. High Imperator Vexor watched through compound eyes as thousands of his species elite took their designated places, each movement a testament to the order that had built their empire across 17 star systems. Today was a statement, a final solution to the human problem. Lyra Novak stood in the holding chamber, wrists bound by quantum shackles that hummed with energy. At 26, she was unremarkable by most standards. Average height, brown hair cropped short against her skull, green eyes that reflected nothing of her thoughts. The Exilarians had expected her to break during the 3 months of captivity. They had applied their most advanced interrogation protocols, carefully calibrated pain thresholds, and psychological manipulation techniques. She had not broken. "The broadcast begins in 7 minutes," announced Sub-Commander Traz, his exoskeleton clicking as he approached. 17 billion viewers across the Empire will witness your termination. Lyra met his gaze. 17 billion witnesses. Perfect. The sub-commander's mandibles twitched, the closest his species could come to a frown. Something about her response triggered a probability anomaly in his tactical assessment algorithms. He made a note to increase security protocols by 12%. The holding chamber doors parted with a whisper of compressed air, revealing 4 Praetorian guards in ceremonial battle armor. They flanked Lyra as she was guided toward the central platform. Above them, holographic displays showed the Exilarian emblem, a perfect hexagonal lattice representing the Empire's ideals of order and control. "Walk," commanded Traz. Lyra complied, her bare feet silent against the polished floor. The corridor leading to the execution platform stretched before her, its walls adorned with glyphs detailing the 63 stellar conquests of the Exilarian Empire. Earth, or as the aliens designated it, Conquest 64, had been their most troublesome acquisition. The humans had not followed expected behavioral patterns. When their major cities were destroyed, they scattered rather than surrendered. When their governments collapsed, local resistance cells formed without central coordination. When their communications were jammed, they developed new methods of transmitting information that the Exilarians couldn't detect. For 8 years, the occupation had been a constant drain on Imperial resources. Lyra's capture had been celebrated as a turning point. As leader of the North American Resistance Network, her tactical innovations had cost the Empire thousands of troops and billions in resources. Her public execution would demonstrate the futility of continued resistance. At least, that was the Exilarian calculation. The platform rose before her, a circular stage of polished obsidian surrounded by transmission arrays designed to broadcast the event across the Empire's considerable territory. High Imperator Vexor stood at its center, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming with embedded status indicators and command interfaces. As the Empire's supreme military leader, his presence elevated this execution from mere punishment to imperial ceremony. "You understand why you are here," Vexor stated. It wasn't a question. "Better than you do," Lyra replied. The High Imperator ignored her response. The human tendency toward irrational final statements was well documented. "You will be given 30 seconds to address the Empire before termination. This is standard protocol, even for enemies of order." Lyra nodded once. The guards positioned her at the center of the platform, then retreated to the perimeter. Around them, the grand auditorium had fallen silent. 17,000 Exilarian elites focused on the impending spectacle. Broadcast drones hovered silently, their lenses capturing every angle for transmission. High Imperator Vexor raised his primary appendage, activating the Empire-wide broadcast network. "Citizens of the glorious Exilarian Empire, today we demonstrate the inevitable conclusion of resistance to order. The human known as Lyra Novak, architect of chaos and disruption, faces just termination. Let her end serve as instruction to all who would challenge imperial harmony." The quantum shackles around Lyra's wrists tightened automatically, forcing her to her knees. The execution apparatus descended from the ceiling, a crystalline structure housing the Empire's most advanced disintegration technology. It would ensure her death was both complete and visually dramatic. As per Protocol 7 Delta, the condemned may address the Empire, Vexor announced, activating the audio amplifiers surrounding Lyra. She raised her head slowly, eyes finding the primary broadcast drone. When she spoke, her voice was clear, measured, without a trace of fear. "My name is Lyra Novak. I am human. What you are about to witness is not an execution." She paused, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. "It is a transmission." Throughout the auditorium, subtle glitches appeared on personal display screens. Momentary fluctuations in the power grid caused lights to flicker, so briefly that most observers dismissed it as imagination. High Imperator Vexor felt something unprecedented. Uncertainty. He activated the execution sequence with a sharp gesture. "Terminate." The crystalline apparatus hummed with building energy. Lyra closed her eyes. Deep within her brain, the quantum neural implant that had evaded all Xilarian scans activated. Developed in secret labs beneath the ruins of MIT, the device was the culmination of human ingenuity, a fusion of biological neural networks and quantum computing that could transmit vast amounts of data through subspace channels undetectable by Imperial sensors. For 3 months, while undergoing interrogation, Lyra had been mapping the entire Xilarian network. Every pain response, every neural scan they performed had provided another access point, another vulnerability. Her capture had never been an accident. It had been the plan from the beginning. As the execution apparatus reached critical power, Lyra's neural implant unleashed its payload. A quantum virus designed to propagate through the Empire's rigidly structured network architecture. The first systems to fall were the simplest: environmental controls, door mechanisms, minor communication relays. Vexor noticed the second power fluctuation with growing concern. "Complete the execution," he commanded. The apparatus discharged. Energy engulfed Lyra's kneeling form in a blinding flash that caused the broadcast drones to automatically adjust their visual filters. For a moment, it appeared the execution had proceeded as planned. Then the smoke cleared. Lyra remained, physically unharmed but slumped forward, seemingly unconscious. The quantum shackles deactivated, clattering to the platform. Throughout the auditorium, confusion spread as personal devices began displaying error messages. "What is happening?" demanded Vexor, turning to his technical advisors. "Why has the apparatus failed?" Dr. Sylvia Kex, the Empire's leading xenotechnologist, stared at her diagnostic panel with growing horror. "High Imperator, we are detecting massive system infiltration. The execution network has been compromised." "Impossible," Vexor hissed. "Isolate the platform systems." "It's not just the platform," Kex replied, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "The entire Imperial network is showing signs of corruption. It's spreading at an exponential rate." On the platform, Lyra stirred. Her vitals had dropped dramatically during the apparent execution, heart rate slowing to near death, brain activity diminishing to minimal levels. Now they began to rise again, though she remained motionless. Throughout the auditorium, chaos was spreading. Communication devices failed simultaneously. Environmental systems began cycling erratically. The massive doors sealed, security protocols engaging without authorization. Vexor activated his emergency command override. Nothing happened. For the first time in his long, distinguished career, the High Imperator felt something dangerously close to fear. Across the Empire, the effects were multiplying. On 17 planets and 43 space stations, Xilarian systems began failing in cascading sequence. Defense grids powered down. Communication networks transmitted corrupted data. Transportation hubs directed vehicles to incorrect destinations. The rigid, perfectly ordered Xilarian infrastructure was coming apart. And 17 billion viewers watched it unfold, The execution broadcast continuing uninterrupted, though now it showed not the death of a human rebel, but the beginning of an empire's collapse. In the shadows of Earth's resistance bunkers, humans gathered around salvaged screens, watching the broadcast with grim satisfaction. Commander Elias Chen, who had taken leadership after Lyra's capture, checked the chronometer on the wall. 27 minutes, he said quietly, just as she calculated. Around him, resistance fighters prepared weapons and equipment. The coordinated counterattack would begin soon, targeting the now vulnerable Xilarian occupation forces. Similar preparations were underway across every occupied human settlement. On the execution platform, Lyra Novak opened her eyes. The neural implant had nearly killed her during the transmission process, burning through her brain's resources at an unsustainable rate. She would not survive much longer. But she didn't need to. She had just enough strength to look up at Vexor, whose compound eyes reflected the chaos unfolding around them. She smiled, a simple human expression that the Xilarians had never quite understood. "You should have studied our history more carefully," she said, her voice barely audible above the growing commotion. "Humans have always been at our best when you back us into a corner." The revolution had begun. The Empire's collapse. Commander Elias Chen moved through the underground complex beneath the ruins of Washington, D.C., his face illuminated by the blue glow of tactical displays. 8 years of occupation had transformed the former museum archives into a nerve center for human resistance. Maps of Xilarian patrol routes covered the walls, alongside salvaged alien technology modified to serve human needs. "Status report," he demanded, approaching the communication station. Lieutenant Amara Okafor looked up from her console, dark eyes bright with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "Lyra's transmission has infiltrated 87% of Imperial systems. Defense grids are down across North America. Xilarian communication channels are broadcasting nothing but static." Chen nodded, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. "And our teams. Strike forces deployed in all 27 designated zones. The Chicago team has already seized the regional command center. Boston and Atlanta report heavy resistance but steady progress." On the main display, a grainy feed showed the execution broadcast, still transmitting across the Empire despite desperate Xilarian attempts to shut it down. Lyra remained on the platform, now surrounded by panicking Imperial officials. The sight sent a pang through Chen's chest. She had been his closest friend, his most trusted advisor, and now his greatest weapon. "She's still conscious," Okafor noted with surprise. "The neural load should have been fatal already." "Lyra always was stubborn," Chen replied quietly. Then, with renewed focus, "Activate Phase 2. Throughout the complex, resistance fighters moved with practiced efficiency. The plan had been years in development, waiting for this precise moment when Xilarian systems would be at their most vulnerable. Every fighter knew their role, a testament to human adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds. Across Earth, a coordinated offensive had begun. Resistance cells attacked Xilarian outposts with primitive but effective weapons. Some wielded modified alien technology. Others used simple explosives and projectile weapons. What they lacked in advanced weaponry, they made up for in numbers and determination. The Xilarians had never understood humanity's greatest strength, the ability to cooperate without central control, to innovate without permission, to find hope in the darkest circumstances. In orbit above Earth, the massive Xilarian command vessel Imperative faced an unprecedented crisis. Admiral Zexna, regional governor of Earth occupation forces, watched in dismay as system after system failed. Tactical displays showed mounting losses across all occupation zones. "How is this possible?" she demanded, her exoskeleton emitting stress pheromones that put her subordinates on high alert. "They are primitives with minimal technology." Science Officer Krex consulted his failing diagnostic tools. "The quantum virus appears to have originated from the execution broadcast. It exploits fundamental architectural vulnerabilities in our systems." "That's impossible," Zexna hissed. "The human could not have carried such technology." We scanned her thoroughly upon capture. Krex's mandibles clicked nervously. Preliminary analysis suggests a bioneural interface, possibly grown within her organic tissue. Our scans would have registered it as normal brain activity. You mean the humans have developed technology that we cannot detect? The Admiral's voice carried dangerous undertones. Not exactly. Krex hesitated. They've developed technology that we would not think to look for. Our fundamental assumptions about computational systems differ from theirs. A nearby console exploded in a shower of sparks. Emergency lighting engaged as the primary power systems failed. Throughout the massive vessel, gravity fluctuated unpredictably. "Evacuate to the emergency command shuttle," Zexna ordered. "We must re-establish control from a clean system." But as the Admiral and her command staff rushed toward the shuttle bay, they found the doors sealed by the same security protocols meant to protect them. Throughout the ship, Solarian troops found themselves trapped in compartments, cut off from both command and each other. On the main bridge, abandoned displays showed the continuing execution broadcast. Lyra Novak still knelt on the platform, but now she was speaking. Her words transmitted to every functioning screen across the Empire. "The Solarian Empire made a critical error," she said, her voice growing weaker but still clear. "You believe that control and order were the same thing. You built perfect systems with perfect logic, never understanding that life itself thrives on adaptation and change." In the Grand Auditorium, High Imperator Vexor watched with growing horror as Imperial security forces fought unsuccessfully to open the sealed doors. Around him, the Empire's elite were descending into panic, a concept so foreign to Solarian society that there were no protocols to address it. "Stop this broadcast immediately," he commanded, but the technicians could only gesture helplessly at their non-responsive equipment. Dr. Sylvia Kex approached him, her usual composure shattered. "High Imperator, I've completed my analysis. The virus isn't simply corrupting our systems, it's learning from them. Each security measure we implement is being adapted to and overcome. It's evolving." "That's not possible," Vexor insisted. "No computational system can evolve without direction." "This one can," Kex replied, "because it isn't purely computational. Somehow they've merged their neural patterns with quantum computing. It operates using biological principles we've never considered." On the platform, Lyra swayed slightly. Medical scans showed her vital signs failing rapidly as the neural implant consumed her remaining biological resources. She had perhaps minutes left to live, but her sacrifice was ensuring the virus would complete its work. "You conquered Earth because we were divided," she continued, her broadcast reaching not just Solarian screens, but resistance outposts across human territory. "You're losing Earth because you taught us unity. Every human who died under your occupation showed us what we were fighting for. Every city you destroyed became a symbol of what we would rebuild." Across the 17 worlds of the Solarian Empire, the effects were catastrophic. Military vessels lost navigational control, some drifting into planetary atmospheres. Communication networks amplified the execution broadcast while blocking all other transmissions. Financial systems redistributed resources randomly, erasing centuries of careful economic planning. The Empire had built its civilization on perfect predictability. Now it faced perfect chaos. Back on Earth, Commander Chen led his strike team through the streets of former Washington, D.C. The once proud Solarian Administrative Center stood before them, its crystalline architecture reflecting the setting sun. Normally impenetrable force fields had failed. Automated defense systems remained dormant. "Remember," Chen told his fighters as they approached, "no unnecessary casualties. The Solarians are victims of their own system as much as we were. We're fighting for freedom, not revenge." Inside the complex, they found Solarian administrators in disarray, their rigid social hierarchy collapsing without functional technology to maintain it. Some fought desperately. Others surrendered immediately, their belief in imperial infallibility shattered. Similar scenes played out across Earth as resistance forces reclaimed territory that had been occupied for 8 long years. The Xelarians' advantage had always been technological superiority. Without it, they were physically outmatched by the larger, stronger humans they had subjugated. In the final moments of the execution broadcast, Lyra Novak looked directly into the camera drones. Her skin had grown pale, eyes sunken, but a fierce determination still burned within them. To any Xelarians watching who survive what comes next, remember this day. Remember that your empire didn't fall because we were stronger or more advanced. It fell because you never understood us. You saw our diversity as weakness. You saw our emotions as flaws. You never realized that what makes us human, our adaptability, our creativity, our capacity for both logic and emotion, these weren't evolutionary mistakes. They were our greatest strengths. She took a labored breath, her final reserves of energy depleting. And to my fellow humans, what we build from these ruins must be better than what came before. Not perfect, not rigid, but better. With those words, Lyra Novak, former professor of game theory at MIT, architect of the resistance, and humanity's greatest weapon, closed her eyes for the final time. The neural implant had completed its work, transmitting not just the quantum virus, but the entirety of her consciousness through the Xelarian network. In her final moments, she had become the virus, guiding its evolution, directing its targets, ensuring it would complete its purpose before degrading safely away. On the 17 worlds of the former Xelarian Empire, the aftermath varied. Some planets descended into chaos as rigid social systems collapsed. Others, particularly those more recently conquered, began immediate negotiations with human representatives. The empire that had stood for 6 centuries unraveled in less than a standard day. 6 months later, Commander Elias Chen, now Earth's representative to the newly formed Galactic Cooperative, stood before the memorial to resistance in what had once been Central Park. At its center stood a simple holographic projection of Lyra Novak, not as she had appeared during the execution broadcast, but as her friends had known her, thoughtful, determined, and ultimately hopeful. Visitors from a dozen former Imperial worlds had gathered for the ceremony, including several Xelarians who had broken from their species' traditional isolationism to learn from their former enemies. "We gather today not to celebrate victory," Chen addressed the assembled crowd, "but to honor sacrifice and to commit ourselves to building something new. The revolution succeeded not because we destroyed our enemy, but because we refused to become them." He gestured to the hologram of Lyra. She didn't give her life just to free Earth. She gave it to show us, and all sentient species, that true strength comes not from control, but from connection. Not from order imposed from above, but from cooperation freely given. As night fell over the recovering Earth, lights came on in cities that had stood dark for years. In orbit, vessels from former Imperial worlds arrived with supplies and technology, not as conquerors, but as trading partners. The quantum virus had reset the balance of power, creating an opportunity that no one had anticipated: genuine cooperation between species that had once been enemies. Humanity had not just survived, it had changed the galaxy. And 17 billion former Imperial citizens had watched it happen in exactly 27 minutes.